I told my husband that I was expecting, and he got very upset. He shouted, "You messed everything up! I didn't want this child!" That same night, he packed his bags and left to be with a younger woman he worked with. His parents supported him, and I was left by myself. But years later, he came back to me. I have been married to Chad for 4 years, and we've been together for 7. We talked about having kids someday, but we never set a specific time. I was using birth control, but about 3 months ago, I got a stomach bug that was going around, and antibiotics and birth control don't always work well together. When I first missed my period, I didn't think much of it. My cycle has always been a bit irregular, especially when I'm stressed, and work had been really busy. But when I started feeling sick in the mornings and noticed my breasts were more tender than usual, I bought a pregnancy test during my lunch break. 2 pink lines, clear as day. I took 3 more tests over the next 2 days, and they were all positive. I was shocked and scared, but also excited. I knew it wasn't planned. But once the surprise wore off, I began to imagine our future as a family. I've always wanted to be a mum, and even though the timing wasn't great, I thought Chad would come around once he got over the initial shock. I waited a week to tell him because I wanted to find the right moment. I wasn't going to do anything fancy like those Instagram announcements with boards and confetti. That's not us. Instead, I made his favorite dinner, lasagna and garlic bread, and I bought a bottle of his favorite bourbon for him and sparkling cider for me. I even wore the blue dress he always likes. I wanted it to be special, even if it wasn't planned. While cooking, I kept thinking about how I would tell him. Should I just say it? Make a joke? I decided to keep it simple. After dinner, I would say, "I have some news. It's going to change our lives." Chad came home around 7, later than usual. He seemed distracted and was constantly checking his phone. That wasn't unusual. He had been busy with a big project at work. He hardly noticed the nice dinner, just mumbled that it looked good and poured himself a big glass of bourbon. Before I could mention the special occasion during dinner, he was quiet and gave short answers when I tried to talk to him. I asked about his day, his project, anything to get a conversation going, but he just shrugged or gave quick replies. Something felt off, but I thought it was just work stress. After we finished eating, I took a deep breath and reached for his hand across the table. I remember saying, "Chad, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. His face went through different emotions, blank, pale, then something I had never seen before, anger mixed with panic. When he finally spoke, he asked if I was joking. When I assured him I wasn't and told him I had taken 4 tests, things quickly got out of hand. I'll never forget what he said next. "You ruined everything." "I didn't want this child." I tried to explain that it was an accident, probably because of the antibiotics messing with my birth control. I thought we could figure it out together, like we always had with other problems. That's when he dropped a big surprise. He said he never wanted kids at all. He claimed he went along with my plans to keep me happy, but it was never real for him. I asked if there was someone else, and his reaction told me everything before he even admitted it. When I pressed him, he finally confessed he had been seeing Vanessa for a few months. Vanessa, the young colleague he often talked about, was great and had fresh ideas for the team. She was 7 years younger than me. While I was still dealing with this double betrayal, Chad started packing, not just a small bag, but a suitcase full of his clothes and things. I couldn't believe my eyes. My husband was actually leaving me the same night I told him I was pregnant. When I asked where he was going, he admitted he was heading to Vanessa's place for now. Within 30 minutes of my pregnancy announcement, Chad was by our front door with his suitcase, saying he would come back for the rest of his stuff later. I asked him if he was really doing this, just walking out on his pregnant wife. He replied, "I can't be a father. I'm not ready." I pointed out that no one is ever completely ready for parenthood, but that's how life works. He just mumbled, "I'm sorry," and said he'd call in a few days. Then he was gone, just like that. I sat in our suddenly too quiet apartment, trying to understand what had just happened. One minute, I was announcing my pregnancy, and the next, my husband was gone, off to his younger girlfriend's place, leaving me and our unborn child behind. I called my best friend Julie, crying so hard she could barely understand me. She came over right away, holding me as I cried and questioned everything about my marriage. "I thought I knew him," I kept saying. "How could I have been so wrong?" The next morning, I woke up on the couch with Julie sleeping in the armchair nearby. For a moment, I hoped it had all been a nightmare until nausea hit me, reminding me that my husband was gone and I was still very much pregnant. Julie made me toast and tea, insisting I eat something for the baby's sake. My hand rested on my stomach. Whatever Chad decided, this was still my child. I tried calling Chad throughout the day, but it went straight to voicemail. My text asking him not to shut me out went unanswered. By afternoon, I was feeling stronger, anger replacing the shock. I called my doctor to schedule my first prenatal appointment. I was going to move forward with or without him. That evening, I got a call from Chad's mother, Rebecca. The conversation was short but eye-opening. She told me Chad had explained the situation to them and suggested I should give him time because he was still too young for a family. When I pointed out he was 31, she brushed it off, saying he was focused on his career. Then came the real kicker. She hinted that I should think about other options, clearly suggesting abortion without actually saying it. I firmly told her I was keeping this baby, her grandchild, no matter what Chad decided. The call ended with me shaking with anger, finally understanding where some of Chad's attitudes came from. His parents had always spoiled him, treating him like he could do no wrong. The next few days went by in a blur. I went to work, trying to act normal, even though it felt like my world had fallen apart. I contacted a lawyer to learn about my options. I started reading about single motherhood and childcare costs. I looked at my finances, figuring out how to make this work alone if I had to. Chad finally texted 3 days after leaving, not to check on me or apologize, but to let me know he was staying at Vanessa's and would send money for bills. When I replied that we needed to talk in person, he said he needed space and wasn't ready to talk yet. A week passed, then 2. He came by the apartment once when I was at work to get more of his things. He left his keys on the counter with a note saying he'd paid rent through next month and would contact me about divorce. Divorce, just like that. I had my first prenatal appointment alone. When the technician did the ultrasound and I heard my baby's heartbeat for the first time, that fast rhythmic sound, I broke down crying. The technician probably thought they were tears of joy, but they were tears of sadness for the family I thought we'd have. The baby measured right on track. They gave me a small printout of the ultrasound image, just a little bean-shaped blur, but already my child. I put it on the refrigerator when I got home. Reminder that no matter what happened with Chad, this little person was counting on me. 3 weeks after Chad left, his father, Roland, called me. Unlike Rebecca's cold approach, he at least asked how I was doing. When I told him honestly that I wasn't doing great after being left for a younger woman and mentioned his wife suggesting abortion, he tried to smooth things over. He said Rebecca didn't mean it like that and that they were just worried about Chad's career. He called my pregnancy unfortunate timing and explained that Chad just wasn't ready to be a father right now. I reminded Roland that I hadn't planned to be a single mother either, but adults deal with life's unexpected challenges. He offered financial help, but made it clear that Chad needed to focus on his career and that he and Vanessa had a connection. After hanging up, I realized something important. I was all alone in this. Chad had chosen Vanessa. His parents had chosen him. It was just me and my baby now, but realizing that was clear. I didn't have to wonder anymore. I didn't have to hope Chad would come around. I could start planning my life, our life, without the weight of uncertainty. I called Julie that night and told her I needed to move. There were too many memories in our apartment. She immediately offered her place until I found somewhere new. As I looked around the apartment we'd shared, I felt something unexpected. A tiny flicker of hope. Not for getting back together. That chance was gone. But for the future, my baby's future, whatever came next would be hard. I knew that. Single motherhood, divorce, starting my life over, none of it would be easy. But one thing I knew for sure, my child would never feel unwanted, not by me, and maybe that would be enough. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the lawyer again to start divorce proceedings. Chad thinks he can just walk away. We'll see about that. I might be down right now, but I'm not out. Not even close. First update. Wow, I can't believe it's been a year since my last post. First, thank you to everyone who commented with advice and support. I read every single message, even if I couldn't respond to them all. Your words meant more than you know during those dark days. So much has happened, and yet writing that feels like an understatement. I have a son now, an actual tiny human who depends on me for everything. His name is Tiago. He's 8 months old, and despite everything, he's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Yesterday, I realized something important while I was folding his tiny socks. Chad has never met him, not once. Not when he was born, not for his first smile, not for his first Christmas, never. My son's father lives less than 30 minutes away and is a complete stranger to his own child. I guess I should start from where I left off. The divorce was finalized when I was 7 months pregnant. Chad didn't contest anything, which my lawyer said was unusual, but made everything move faster. The judge ordered reasonable child support based on Chad's income, which is something at least, though it's been spotty. I'll explain that later. I moved out of our apartment and found a smaller 2-bedroom, place closer to Julie. The rent is higher than I'd like, but it's in a good school district, which I've learned is something you start thinking about way earlier than you'd expect. My dining room is now half nursery, overflowing with a pack-and-play bouncer and what feels like a small toy store exploding across my living space. Marie Kondo would have a heart attack. Tiago was born on a Tuesday night after 19 hours of labor. Julie was my birthing partner, holding my hand and feeding me ice chips while I swore I couldn't do it. The nurses kept asking about the father, and I got tired of explaining, so I just started saying he's not in the picture, which was both true and a huge understatement. Those first weeks were a blur of sleeplessness, pain, TMI, and wondering if I was doing anything right. The night we came home, Tiago wouldn't stop crying. And I remember sitting on my bathroom floor at 3 a.m., also crying, Googling, "Why won't my baby sleep?" on my phone while he wailed in my arms. I'd never felt so alone or so overwhelmed, but we survived. Day by day, we figured it out together. Tiago and I learned his cries, hungry sounds, different from tired, which sounds different from I just want to be held. I discovered he loves being sung to, even though I can't sing well. I watched his personality emerge bit by bit. He's observant, stubborn, wonder where he gets that from, and has a laugh that can light up the whole room. Work has been complicated. I went back when Tiago was 10 weeks old because I needed the money. My boss, Anastasia, has been surprisingly understanding, letting me work from home 2 days a week. Finding childcare nearly broke me, financially and emotionally. Daycare costs more than my rent, which seems absolutely crazy, but it's the reality for many of us. I found a place that doesn't require taking out a second mortgage, but it's still a huge part of my monthly budget. The financial stuff has been one of the hardest parts. Child support from Chad comes sometimes, but there's always an excuse when it's late. His car needed repairs. He had unexpected expenses. He's switching jobs. Last month, it was 2 weeks late because he and Vanessa were on vacation. I saw the pictures on Instagram before he bothered to respond to my texts about the missing payment. Speaking of social media, I made the mistake of checking his profiles a few months after Tiago was born. There they were, Chad and Vanessa, looking happy and carefree at some rooftop bar. No signs of sleepless nights or baby messes in their world. I blocked them both after that. Julie says it's better for my mental health, and she's right. Julie has been my lifeline through all of this. She comes over with takeout when I'm too tired to cook, holds Tiago so I can take a shower, and never complains when all I can talk about is baby stuff. She even organized a small baby shower when I was 8 months pregnant, after Chad's friends all stopped talking to me. Funny how people pick sides so quickly. Chad's parents have been interesting. After initially supporting their son, leaving his pregnant wife, they changed their minds once Tiago was born. I got a text from Rebecca about a month after he arrived, asking to see their grandson. I didn't respond right away, trying to figure out how I felt about it. Then came flowers, baby clothes, and even a letter about how they'd love to be part of their grandson's life. I finally agreed to a short visit when Tiago was 4 months old. It was awkward, to say the least. Rebecca kept saying how much he looked like Chad as a baby, while Roland took a lot of photos on his phone. They brought expensive baby gifts and talked about starting a college fund. Not once did they mention their son's absence or say sorry for how they acted before. When they asked to take him for an overnight stay, I had to draw a line. No way was I letting my baby go anywhere without me, especially with people who had suggested I terminate my pregnancy a year earlier. That conversation didn't go well. Rebecca accused me of using Tiago to punish Chad, which was rich since Chad had shown no interest in meeting his son. That's the part I still can't understand. How do you know you have a child and just not care, not wonder what they look like, how they're growing, or if they're happy? Chad has sent money sometimes, but has never asked for a photo, a video, or a visit. It's like Tiago is just an idea to him, not a real person with his own face and smile. I've tried to be the bigger person. When Tiago was born, I sent a simple text with his birth stats and a photo. No response. I set up a shared photo album online where I upload pictures, just in case Chad ever wants to see what he's missing. As far as I can tell, he's never opened it. For Tiago's first Christmas, I sent a holiday card with his photo to Chad's address. The envelope came back marked "Return to Sender." Meanwhile, life goes on. Tiago started daycare and got sick every possible time in his first month there. Another surprise of parenthood. Nobody warns you about, and has since built up a strong immune system. He's crawling, pulling himself up on furniture, and putting everything in his mouth. My apartment is baby-proof to the max. I haven't seen my coffee table. without corner protectors in so long that I've forgotten what it actually looks like. My daily routine has become a careful dance. Wake up at 5:30 a.m. before Tiago to shower and get dressed. Get him up, fed and dressed by 7:15. Daycare drop-off by 8 hours, work until 5. Rush to pick him up by 5:30, sometimes paying a late fee. Home by 6 for dinner. Bath, stories and bedtime routine. Then a few precious hours to clean, do laundry, pay bills, and maybe watch half an episode of something on Netflix before falling asleep on the couch. Rinse and repeat. The hardest moments are the ones no one talks about. Like when Tiago had his first fever at 3 a.m. and I had to decide whether to take him to the ER alone, or when he says, "Mama," but there's no dad in his vocabulary because that person doesn't exist for him, or the daycare forms that ask for father's information, and I have to write NA while surrounded by other parents filling out both sections. But there are beautiful moments too. Morning cuddles. When he wakes up happy and chatty, the way he reaches for me when I pick him up from daycare, his fascination with the ceiling fan, and his joy when splashing in the bath. The weight of him falling asleep on my chest, his warm breath against my neck. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. Being a single parent is the hardest thing I've ever done. There are days when I'm so tired I put the milk in the cabinet and the cereal in the fridge. Days when I snap at customer service. People over nothing because I'm running on empty. Days when I cry in the shower because it's the only place Tiago can't hear me. But I'm doing it. We're doing it. And strangely enough, I'm proud of that. Tiago's first birthday is coming up next month. Julie is helping me plan a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just a few friends, some cake, and probably more decorations than needed because Julie gets carried away with Pinterest. I thought about inviting Chad's parents but decided against it after our last talk. They still text sometimes asking to see him, but it's always on their terms, with no acknowledgement of how their son has abandoned his child. As for Chad himself, I'm not expecting a card, let alone a visit. Last I heard through friends, he and Vanessa moved in together and got a dog. I guess that's the level of responsibility he's okay with. The big news came last week. I finally got approved for a modest apartment in a slightly better area. It's nothing fancy, but it has a small yard where Tiago can play, and the schools are good. As I was signing the lease, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Rebecca, saying they were having a family reunion next month and wanted to include their grandson. The text included a photo of Chad and Vanessa looking happy together. I stared at that photo for a long time. There was Chad, smiling, living his life as if his son doesn't exist. Something changed in me at that moment. Not anger exactly, but clarity. I've spent a year waiting for Chad to step up, to show any interest in his child. A year sending updates into the void. A year trying to be fair and reasonable despite everything. I texted Rebecca back. Tiago won't be going. If Chad wants to meet his son, he knows how to reach me. But I'm done making excuses for him or pretending he's anything but absent by choice. Then I blocked her number too. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I'm done protecting Chad's image or his feelings. I'm done carrying the emotional weight while he gets to live without consequences. I'm done pretending for Tiago's sake that his father might suddenly become interested in him. The truth is, we're better off without someone who could walk away so easily. Tiago deserves people in his life who choose him, who show up for him, who love him unconditionally. I can't force Chad to be that person. So here we are. 1 year later, a single mum and her son against the world. It's not the life I planned, not even close. But looking at Tiago's sleeping face tonight, I realized something important. Sometimes the family you end up with isn't the one you expected, but it's still perfect in its own way. I don't know what the future holds. The divorce settlement included a clause about revisiting custody if Chad ever decides he wants to be involved, which seemed like a joke at the time. But my lawyer said it was standard. Part of me hopes he stays away forever. Another small part still can't believe he doesn't want to know his amazing son. For now, I'm focusing on what I can control. Building a stable home, making happy memories, being both mum and dad as best I can, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to trust again someday. But that's a problem for future Melissa. Present Melissa needs to finish the laundry and go to bed. Tiago will be up at 6 a.m, whether I'm ready or not. So that's my update. 1 year, one perfect baby boy, and 1 day at a time. Second update. It's been 4 years since my last update. I honestly didn't think I'd be posting here again. But something happened yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. And I needed to share it. Tiago just turned 5 last month. 5. I still can't believe my little baby is now this talkative kindergartner who knows all the planets in order and corrects me when I say dinosaur names wrong. Time is strange. Yesterday was his first day of kindergarten. I took the morning off work to walk him in, expecting the usual chaos of drop-off. What I wasn't expecting was to see Chad's friend Leroy in the school parking lot dropping off his daughter. I froze for a moment, but Tiago was pulling on my hand, excited to see his classroom, so I pushed through it. After getting Tiago settled, only a few tears from me, not him, I was heading back to my car when Leroy came up to me. I braced myself for awkwardness, but instead, he just asked how I was doing. We ended up getting coffee at the shop across from the school, and that's when he dropped the big news. Chad and Vanessa broke up 6 months ago. Apparently she wanted kids, and he was saying he wasn't ready. At 35, after leading her on for years, she finally gave him an ultimatum, and he chose not to be with her. Chad's job got smaller last year, and he's been having a hard time finding steady work. Leroy said he's been sleeping on friends' couches while Vanessa keeps the apartment they shared. The perfect life he left us for has completely fallen apart. I sat there, stirring my coffee, unsure how to feel. There was no satisfaction. No, he got what he deserved. Moment like I might have imagined years ago. Just a strange emptiness, like hearing about a character from a TV show I stopped watching a long time ago. What struck me the most was how different my life is now compared to when Chad left. After years of juggling being a single mom and work, things have finally settled down. I've been at the same job for 6 years now, and last year, Anastasia promoted me to senior project manager. The raise meant I could finally buy a small townhouse in a good school district. Nothing fancy, but it's ours, with Tiago's handprints painted on his bedroom, wall and a little garden where we try to grow tomatoes that never turn out right. Getting financial stability was hard. There were so many nights spent figuring out budgets and counting every expense. Child support from Chad eventually stopped completely around Tiago's 3rd birthday after many missed payments. I tried to get help from the enforcement agency, but Chad changed jobs so many times it felt like chasing a ghost. Eventually, I decided the stress of fighting for support wasn't worth it. I'd rather Tiago see me calm and present than anxious and angry over money. We could manage without it. The question I've been dreading started coming about a year ago. Why don't I have a daddy? Tiago asked me while we were grocery shopping, completely out of nowhere. I had prepared for this moment and read articles about how to explain it, but nothing can prepare you for looking into those innocent eyes. I told him a simple version of the truth, that his daddy wasn't ready to be a parent, but that didn't mean anything was wrong with him, that sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt others. But I wanted and loved him enough for 2 parents. Those talks never get easier. Each time Tiago notices another kid with their dad at the park or sees father-son activities at school, my heart breaks a little. But we've built our own traditions. Julie is still his favorite aunt, coming over for movie nights and teaching him card tricks. My parents drive up every month to spend weekends with their grandson. We have our village, even without Chad. About 10 months ago, something unexpected happened at a parent-teacher night at Tiago's preschool. I kept noticing this dad with kind eyes and a funny t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing. I'm just explaining why I'm right." His daughter, Emma, was in Tiago's class, and they had become friends. I overheard him handling her meltdown when she had to leave the classroom toys, and something about his patience caught my attention. Douglas, Emma's dad, is a widower who makes homemade pizza on Fridays with dinosaur-shaped pepperoni, remembers Teacher Appreciation Week without reminders, and doesn't mind when my son talks endlessly about space. It started with playdates. The kids were friends anyway, so it felt natural. Then coffee while they played, then texting about school things we both missed, and then dinners after soccer practice ran late. We had more dinners, more texts, and more conversations that went late into the evening after the kids were asleep. Douglas never rushed anything. He understood that it was me and Tiago together. He asked thoughtful questions about Tiago's interests, brought him books about stars after hearing about his space phase, and the first time he fixed Tiago's wobbly bicycle seat without being asked. I nearly cried from how kind it was. After 6 months, Douglas shared about losing Emma's mom to cancer when Emma was just a year old, how scared he was to raise a daughter alone, and how he kept her mom's photos around so Emma would know her. The honesty of his grief and love made me trust him in a way I hadn't trusted anyone in years. We've been officially dating for 7 months now. The kids know we're special friends and seem genuinely happy about our blended playdates. Last month, Douglas and I talked about where this is going. Nothing dramatic, just sitting on my back porch after the kids were asleep, discussing our hopes and fears. He wants to move forward together, and so do I. We're taking it slow, but for the first time in 5 years, I'm allowing myself to think about a future with someone again. Meanwhile, Chad's parents have suddenly become interested in Tiago again, after years of occasional texts and gift cards on birthdays. Rebecca called last month asking if they could take him for a weekend. When I explained that wasn't going to happen after years of little contact, she got defensive, saying they always wanted to be involved, but thought I was keeping them away. The truth is, they hardly made any effort until now. I wonder if Chad moving back in with them has anything to do with their sudden interest. Douglas asked last week if he could take Tiago fishing with Emma next weekend. Something so simple, yet it made my throat tight watching. Tiago's excitement about learning to fish. After Leroy's revelation yesterday, I checked Chad's Instagram for the first time in years. His carefully planned posts of vacations and parties have changed to vague quotes about new beginnings and finding yourself. No mention of Tiago turning 5 just miles away. I closed the app, feeling oddly at peace. 5 years ago, I felt broken, scared, and alone. Today, I have a job I'm proud of, a home I own, an amazing kid who surprises me every day, and a partner who chooses us every day, not because he has to, but because he wants to. So that's where I am 5 years later, not where I expected to be, but exactly where I meant to be. And Chad? His choices led him exactly where they were supposed to. I can't even find it in me to be bitter anymore. That part of my life feels like a different story, one I stepped away from long ago. Third update. Last Saturday started like any other. Pancake breakfast, then rushing to Tiago's soccer game. Douglas and I were under an umbrella watching the storm when Douglas nudged me. "Is that someone you know?" Across the field stood Chad. After years of no contact, my ex-husband was just watching our son play soccer. No warning, no heads-up text, nothing. When halftime came, Tiago ran over for water, excited about his play. That's when I saw Chad coming toward us. Tiago noticed him too and asked who the stranger was. Before I could answer, Chad was standing there awkwardly, commenting on how big Tiago had gotten. I sent Tiago back to his team and confronted Chad. He admitted his mother had told him about the soccer schedule. Of course, Rebecca. The sudden increase in contact from his parents made sense now. Douglas introduced himself, and I noticed Chad flinch a little when he called himself Tiago's dad. I corrected him, biologically only. After some tense words, Chad asked if we could talk after the game. I reluctantly agreed to meet for 20 minutes at a nearby coffee shop. Douglas took Tiago and Emma for ice cream while I met with Chad. He ordered me a cappuccino, not knowing I switched to lattes years ago. A small detail that showed how much had changed. Chad's story came in bits. Therapy for a year, 8 months sober, moving back in with his parents after breaking up with Vanessa. The biggest surprise was that he had actually asked his parents to limit contact with Tiago because he couldn't handle the thought of what he left behind. Now he wanted to make things right and know his son. I told him straight out that Tiago wasn't the baby he walked away from, but a person with feelings and a life Chad knew nothing about. He admitted he couldn't just walk in and be dad, then asked about my relationship with Douglas. I saw pain on his face when I told him Douglas had been more of a father than he ever was. I agreed to think about a supervised meeting with strict rules. I would be there, it would be short, and if he disappeared again, that was it, forever. 3 days later, after talking with Douglas and our family therapist, I set up a meeting at a park, telling Tiago was harder than I thought. His questions were heartbreaking. Why his father wanted to see him now, whether Douglas would come too, and if his biological father would like him. He decided to wear his soccer jersey to show Chad he was good at soccer. The meeting wasn't terrible. Chad brought a Lego soccer field set, and they built it together while I watched nearby. I noticed some similarities I had forgotten. The same look of concentration, the same crinkle of his eyes when they smiled. Over the next 2 weeks, we had several similar supervised meetings. Then Chad called, asking to take Tiago to a movie alone. I refused right away. 3 weeks versus 7 years? Not happening. He seemed to accept this, suggesting we all 3 go instead. Before I could respond, he showed up at our house with his parents uninvited. Roland and Rebecca pushed for moving forward as a family while Chad mumbled that he told them this wasn't the way. I sent them home, but Chad asked to talk to me alone. That's when he said it. "I still love you, Melissa." I never stopped. The nerve was unbelievable. He suggested that even with my relationship with Douglas, we should think about getting back together as Tiago's real parents because our son deserved that chance. I asked him to leave, saying I needed to think. When Douglas came downstairs, I told him about Chad's declaration. Douglas couldn't hide his concern about Chad being Tiago's biological father, but I assured him I was where I wanted to be. Later that night, Chad texted that he meant what he said about wanting another chance with our family. I stared at those words. feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. The man who left when I needed him the most wasn't someone I could ever trust again. Tomorrow I'll call Chad to set clear rules about his role in Tiago's life, as a biological father only, not as my partner. Some bridges, once burned, stay ash. If you enjoyed this Reddit story and want to hear more, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling content. Your support means a lot. Thank you for being part of this journey.